Well, thank you, Laura, and good morning, folks. This is Bob Westerfield. I'm broadcasting from the Griffin campus. I am the vegetable and fruit specialist, or one of them, for the horticulture department. And we're going to talk a little bit about troubleshooting vegetables in the garden. And I can tell you, it's been one of the craziest years we have had with the weather. We had a cool spring, then we started to heat up, and just the last few days, it almost felt like fall. So there's a number of things going on. The vegetables are beginning to kick in. They are growing now. They were kind of stunted for a while. One of the first things I always like to point out is, have your soil tested. Our local county extension offices can test your garden soil and your ornamental soils as well. And what you really want to find out beyond just what it needs fertility-wise is the pH level. The pH level is extremely critical, particularly in vegetables, because you really have a very fast, short growing season. So you want to make sure that pH is somewhere in the slightly acidic range, somewhere maybe between 6 and 6.5 would be ideal. And the only way you're going to know that is by soil testing. Next. So let's talk a little bit about some of the problems you may encounter. If you've ever grown vegetables before, or maybe this is your first time, certainly weeds are a huge issue in Georgia, particularly in our gardens and many of our different agronomic fields. Sometimes those weeds can come in just because, birds will eat the seeds and deposit them. Other times they can actually come in through manure. A lot of folks use cow manure, horse manure, and it's usually a pretty good organic matter that we can put in the soil. But also you have to be careful. I see a lot of pictures of vegetables come into me from the county agents. Sometimes they look twisted and torqued, the vegetables, and a lot of times that's herbicide damage. Herbicides that were applied to pastures, then the cattle, the horses eat that, and the manure still has active ingredients. So be real careful when using fresh manure. I like to see it composted for at least 4 to 6 months. Also weed seeds. Cows, horses, they're going to eat everything in that pasture. And if they're eating a lot of weed seed, crabgrass and other type things, that seed can come right out in the manure, and it's still extremely active and can germinate. So that's one thing you really have to look at. If you do have weeds, and let's look at the next slide. There's a couple of ways to go about it. Certainly hand pulling is one method. This is me at the Griffin campus. I'm actually just trying to till out some of the weeds in the corn to try to get ahead of it. So mechanical type hand pulling or tillage or some form like that is one way to control weeds. Next. Mulch is a fantastic way to try to not only put a barrier of protection to help knock down weeds, but it also gives you a little bit of insulation to help when it gets really hot out. And it helps to conserve some of the moisture we put out for our plants from evaporating too quickly. Using some type of organic mulch, wood chips, pine straw, wheat straw, oftentimes pays big dividends. Next. One thing I've really gotten into over the last few years in my garden and doing some research on is using weed fabric. Now, this is a little different than the stuff that you buy at the big box stores, the Home Depots and the Lowe's and places like that. They sell sort of landscape weed fabric. To me, that's a little bit on the light side and does not last well. What I use is erosion control fabric, and you can go online. I purchased mine from a place called All Seasons Covered, and there are other sites out there that sell it. This is the stuff you see the road department sometimes use to kind of hold back erosion. What I like to do is roll it out. You can buy it in different widths and lengths. I roll it out in my garden. You hold it down with pins, little landscape pins. Then what I do is I take a little hand torch. It's kind of fun to use. You take this little hand torch that's propelled by a little lantern type gas, a little propane thing like you'd use on a lantern for camping. And then I burn little holes into it. If you try to cut them with a razor blade, it's really hard to cut this stuff. But it is permeable, meaning irrigation can go through it, fertilizer can go through it. But I burn the holes, and then I plant within those holes, and it gives me a fantastic weed control throughout the season of gardening. Next. So let's look at some of the other issues that you might come in contact with, and particularly this time of the year. And I'm seeing this one show up right now. Blossom end rot. A lot of people think their disease is occurring on their vegetables, particularly tomatoes, and it really isn't. It is a nutritional deficiency or physiological deficiency, if you will. Blossom end rot is a lack of calcium in the cell walls of the fruit, But oftentimes it can come because we've got irregular moisture patterns. Whether the plants go really dry or there's excessive rainfall, sometimes the plant does not absorb the calcium that it needs. Calcium is normally introduced into the soil when we put lime out, agricultural dolomitic limestone. And so again, that's where doing that soil sample will really help to tell you if your pH is off. And if your pH is real low, you'll probably be adding that calcium, magnesium, lime that's going to boost your calcium level and stop the blossom end rot. The other thing is really watch your moisture management. You want to keep the soil slightly moist, but not overly saturated, and you should probably be able to live through this issue. Next. Blotchy ripening. How many times have you ever cut open a tomato and sometimes on pepper and you think it looks really good on the outside? Sometimes it might be a little bit off color, but then you've got a really white, hard core. This is a phenomenon that you'll see oftentimes a little bit later in the summer when we get kind of dry conditions and then extremely heavy rains, and it's sort of irregular moisture pattern again. Sometimes more the older varieties of tomatoes will exhibit this. And the tomato is perfectly edible, but you kind of have to cut the core out. Again, I think it comes into having good irrigation practices. I like drip irrigation systems because they deliver that water kind of lightly to the soil in more even quantities than overhead watering. A lot of what I'm talking about, if you go to our UGA Extension publications, we've got a publication on weed control for vegetables. We've got one on irrigation. Everything that we're going to pretty much talk about, we have written a publication on, and so it'll be real easy for you to be able to download that off the internet. Next. Sun scald. Well, every time I go to the beach, I feel like I've got enough protection, and lo and behold, I get sunburn. And that's the same thing with vegetables. Vegetables in general actually like full sun, but the plants like full sun. The actual fruit, the pepper, the tomato, the cucumber, it actually grows under the plant. It likes to be shaded. Sometimes if we're not careful, particularly on peppers, when we harvest them, we rip off some of the foliage and we expose a fruit or a vegetable to the sunlight. And then you kind of get this really brown, leather-looking sight. So, that vegetable there can be picked. You can cut out the bad area and eat it, but just be cognizant that try to keep the vegetables under cover, under the leaves, so that they get a little bit of shade and don't form this sun scald. Next. Fruit cracking. Okay, this can make a real ugly looking fruit. You've got a perfect looking vegetable, and at the last minute, boom, it looks like, a spaceship landed on top. You get these concentric circles or splitting or line hair cracks going up the peppers, tomatoes, eggplants. Again, a lot of this really reverts back to cultural practices. When we get areas of the garden that stay dry and then suddenly get a tremendous rainfall as those vegetables are beginning to mature, sometimes they're little water pigs, and they will suck up so much water that it can't go anywhere. And what will happen is these little skins of the fruits will begin to stretch, and lo and behold, it can't hold anymore, and they begin to split open. And so it's sort of a physiological disorder. It's really hard to prevent it. You can cause it by overwatering, so just try to do the best you can, not overwatering, maybe providing an inch or two of irrigation per week. And that way the plant doesn't suddenly need to take up a ton of water when you have rainfall that you can't control. Fruit cracking, again, physiological. Next. Okay, we're just going to kind of sum this one up in one slide, but we're talking about vegetable diseases. And so just right off the bat, one thing you want to do is be able to determine, hey, do I have a vegetable disease or is this an insect damage? And one of the ways to really tell, or at least kind of get you on the right track, usually with an insect, you're going to either have a piece of the leaf missing, or there'll be kind of a total discoloration. Maybe it's spider mites or something like that. With a vegetable disease, you're normally going to start off with some type of spotting or brown or black area. And oftentimes it'll have multiple colors, almost like a halo around it, particularly in fungus. So it's kind of important using your county agent or wherever source you have to figure out, do I have a fungal problem or is this bacteria? Because that will determine what you spray. It's different chemicals. Right now, as we're beginning to warm up, humidity's coming back, you're going to see a lot of foliar diseases, particularly on tomatoes. My advice on all of these things is try to prune out the infected areas, get them away from the site. Try to avoid overhead watering that's going to kind of put moisture on the leaves and attribute to that. Prune out excess stems, particularly in tomatoes that are non-bearing, the sucker shoots, get those out of the plant to get more air circulation. Crop rotation, try not to plant the same family of vegetables in the same area each year, but rotate the families around so that you sort of break the disease cycle that may be occurring in the soil. And finally, when it looks like it's going to be bad or you know it's coming, chemical control. Contact your local county extension office and get a chemical control suggestion, possibly, whether it's a fungicide or bactericide, but make sure you're spraying the right product and reading the label. But we can get some control or prevention through chemical controls. Next. Viruses are just one of those things that once you get it, it's not a whole lot you can do. Just like when you have a virus in your human body, you basically got to just treat some symptoms, but you wait it out. Same thing, we've got a lot of viruses that can affect many of our vegetables. Tobacco mosaic, which is transmitted through tobacco products. We've got wilt viruses, we've got tomato mosaic, just all kinds of different things. When you suspect a virus, you're normally going to get curled leaves, they're going to look distorted, you may get funny concentric circles forming up. There is no real control. What we suggest is just removing the entire plant, getting it away from the site, and hopefully you're kind of saving it from being an infection for the other plants that are nearby. There are no sprays or any type of controls that we would put on a virus. Next. Insects, there's a lot of them out there. And as we warm up, you're going to see more and more. And I think that the thing to remember is they're not all bad. In fact, I would venture to say 95% of the insects that you may encounter, in your landscape, in your garden, are probably either non-harmful or they're beneficial. One of the things I do in my garden is I plant buckwheat. Buckwheat is a fast-growing summer annual. It blooms, little white profuse blooms, and it attracts a lot of beneficial and pollinating insects. So we need to use a lot of care if we treat our plants for insects that we don't knock out the good guys. In this picture, the one on the left is actually a female squash vine borer. It's a bad guy. The one on the right is the larva stage of a lady beetle. And it does look evil, I will give you that. But at the end of the day, it is a very good insect. It's one that'll eat the bad guys. So make sure you get correct identification on the insect before you apply a treatment. And then, when you do have to spray something, we want to kind of look at using the safest chemical possible. Right now, you're going to see more and more insects, squash vine borers, squash bugs, leaf-footed bugs, aphids. There's a lot of things out there. And if we go ahead to the next slide, go ahead and choose the most environmentally friendly chemical to start with. Sometimes the safer soaps, or just using maybe even a little dish detergent in a gallon of water, you can use that to kill a lot of the easy to control insects. And the way it works is really not poison, it's a suffocant. It covers their exoskeleton, and then they're not able to breathe or function. As you begin to have maybe some tougher pests like white flies, leaf-footed bugs, you may have to jump up a little bit on the chemical chain. So, try some organic products first. Neem oil or something like natural pyrethrin. And then if it has to go beyond that, again, it's good to contact the local county office or check out some of our publications on vegetable insect control and maybe choose a next product in line that can do the job. Pay particular attention though when you're using any product, chemical, that you read the label, because a lot of times it'll say, don't treat within 5 days of harvest or things like that. And there's something, just for safety's sake, you want to make sure you read that thoroughly. So that's kind of a quick overview of some of the things to be looking out there. There's certainly a lot more, but that kind of at least opens your eyes. I think the key is to scout your garden frequently, be out there, harvest your vegetables as soon as they're ready so you don't leave them out there as a buffet to damaging insects, and hopefully you'll have a great gardening season.